Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football Michigan. Finishing out the 2024 season, really getting some real momentum, obviously capping it off with a massive win against Alabama in the bowl game. And look, as a Michigan fan myself, like I'm fired up that Michigan won that football game against Alabama. I think there's a lot of guys on that Michigan roster that are wearing the winged helmet for the last time that deserve to go out winning a football game. The bigger storyline for me coming out is this young talent and what this Michigan team can be in 2025. And I want to get into the conversation of, all right, well, what does the offseason plans look like for Michigan to take that step in 2025? I think that conversation has to first start with, kind of evaluating what you have on this roster. And I think the best part about this bowl game is you got to understand where some of this young talent on this Michigan roster is at, because a lot of them had a lot of opportunity to kind of audition going into 2025. So that's where I want to start, kind of diving back into that game, talking about some players that I think you have some newfound confidence in heading into 2025, and then talking about the places on this roster that, Michigan probably still needs to address in the transfer portal going into 2025. Fired up to get into it. Before we do, and as always, to the Michigan fans, one, I think most importantly, it's been a wild last couple of months. The last 6 weeks of being a Michigan fan has been an absolute blast. And the amount of support y'all have shown the fellas has been absolutely amazing. Can't thank you guys enough. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. More importantly, let it fly in the comment section in terms of where does Michigan still need to address on this roster after seeing some of that young talent in the bowl game. Without further ado, let's get into first kind of a put the depth chart to a checklist and talk about some positions we feel good about heading into 2025. I think it starts to me. Look, Jordan Marshall got a lot of the media buzz, and Jordan Marshall was freaking awesome in that football game. It starts on the offensive line to me because you look at Michigan's struggle specifically early in 2024. Yes, the passing attack, the quarterback play, it was never good enough for Michigan in 2024. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. But the offensive line got off to a slow start too. One of the biggest positives of the month of November in this bowl game and heading into 2025 is it's hard to see this offensive line not being good in 2025. It finally seemed like a unit that was kind of coming together and gelling. And I think the biggest question mark was with Miles Hinton going on to the NFL draft, what was Michigan going to do at offensive tackle? I mean, not only do you have a guy like Andrew Babaloa coming in, not only could you potentially add a guy like Ty Haywood, two five-star tackles that will no doubt be pushing to get on the football field in 2025. To me, it starts with Andrew Sprague getting his first career start at right tackle. Look, was it perfect for Andrew Sprague? No, absolutely not. But this was a guy that we knew would need at least a year before he was able to really put it together. It was a year of, hey, hitting the weights, getting some burritos in you, putting on a little bit of weight. He looked awesome at right tackle for a true freshman against that Alabama front seven. Yeah, it wasn't perfect, but to me, coming out of that football game, I got a lot of confidence that Andrew Sprague can be a very quality starter at the offensive tackle spot in 2025. And I think the cool conversation for Andrew Sprague is that's as bad as it's going to get. Like, he's only going to get better having another full offseason within this Michigan program going into year two. That's normally when you start to see some of those line of scrimmage players kind of hit their stride, as they kind of polish up their technique. But I think more importantly, kind of becoming a grown man. I think the biggest jump that offensive linemen have to make is, yeah, technically they got to get better. But I think most importantly, it's, hey, you were by far the most physically imposing football player on the football field at the high school ranks. That's not the case anymore. You kind of got to become a grown man. And Andrew Sprague won the body type. It looked really good. Like, you can tell he's done some nice work in the weight room. Did not look like that physicality lacked at all. Really good athlete for that size and length too. Andrew Sprague, a lot of confidence in heading into 2025. And I'd say the same thing for Evan Link, who moved over to the left tackle spot. Look, Evan Link, it was not a great start to the 2024 year for Evan Link. He was a guy that consistently got better. And again, redshirt freshman this year. He's only going into year three. This is not some fifth year going into his sixth year that you're not expecting a massive jump. I'm expecting big time jumps from both Evan Link and Andrew Sprague. The inside of the offensive line started playing much better football, and I think you're going to have some young kids really push to get on the football field in 2025. To me, leaving that football game, The offensive line, with the continuity they're going to have coming back in 2025, I think it's going to be back to what we expect with Michigan under Sherrone Moore, and that is elite line of scrimmage play, specifically on the offensive line. Now, I think secondly, Jordan Marshall. I mean, Jordan Marshall looks to be a star in the making. He has every trait you want in a running back. He's really good at the second level, making people miss. He can pick up those hard yards like Blake Corum was able to do a couple of years ago. We always talk about the pass catchers going into 2025 with Bryce Underwood coming in. The best thing you can do for Bryce is give him a good run game. And from what you saw from the offensive line, what you saw from Jordan Marshall, bringing in a guy like Justice Haynes, that rushing attack is going to be really dynamic in 2025. Not to mention, you're going to have a passing attack that defenses have to respect. So you're not going to see all these 8-man boxes that we're used to seeing. And you have Bryce Underwood, who is a phenomenal athlete at the quarterback position in and of itself. This rushing attack is going to be back to kind of where we expect it to be in the 2025 year. Now, I think the biggest concern, you might say, on the offensive side of the football is still the pass catchers. Freddie Moore, I thought, looked really good. Outside of that, it's a really hard position to address because we're so limited with our passing attack from the quarterback play. We just really don't push the ball down the field, so it's hard to really evaluate the pass catchers on this roster. But I do think it's probably fair to say Michigan wants to get better there heading into 2025. Now, Freddie Moore was a very intriguing development. This has been a guy that's flashed at times, even going back to some of the spring games, good juice with the football in his hands, but then you see him kind of use that frame and kind of have that contested catch with that back shoulder in the end zone. Freddie Moore can be a guy for Michigan in the 2025 year, but outside of Freddie Moore, you're probably looking for guys to step up. Now, Michigan has been aggressive in the portal. Now, taking a look at a few names that Michigan's going after, because that's the one position I think Michigan's lacking. Outside of that, I expect this offense to take a massive jump in 2025. Now, Troy Stellato, the first one I want to talk about, a guy that Michigan has been in contact with and kind of entered the mix for. Intriguing kid coming out of high school. He committed to Clemson. He is 6'1", 190, was a legit 4.4 guy coming out of high school. So it's a decent frame with some really, really good long speed. I think he can be dangerous with the football in his hands. Hasn't really been extremely productive at Clemson because of some of the injuries that he's had. This would be an upgrade to the wide receiver position. Now, I don't think he's a wide receiver one in this Michigan offense, but it's a guy that can do some things that you probably want to add to your wide receiver room. And at the end of the day, we're just looking for bodies and kind of create that competitive depth. Another guy that I'd probably file very similar is Skylar Bell, who started at the Power 4 level at Wisco, goes to UConn. Really good season at UConn. A guy that, to me, is not the flashiest wide receiver, but he's kind of a do-it-all guy. You're going out and checking some of the UConn stuff because I know he's a Michigan target. He can win vertically down the field. He can be dangerous with the football in his hands. He creates nice separation in his route trees as well. This would be another quality addition to the wide receiver room. Now, one name that I think should be a massive target for Michigan is Noah Thomas. Noah Thomas just hit the transfer portal from Texas A&M a couple of days ago. 6'6", 200 pounds, track and field and basketball background coming out of high school. A guy that you love all the traits that he brings to the table. It hasn't necessarily fully clicked for him during his time at Texas A&M, but you see the flashes, so to speak. If you can get Noah Thomas to reach his full potential, this is a true bona fide wide receiver one. And there's not that many of those kind of guys left. And so if Michigan's looking to add one of those guys, Noah Thomas to me would be that name. Now, as of right now, I don't know if Michigan is pursuing, but would be certainly a guy that I'd be interested with if you're a Michigan fan trying to enhance that wide receiver. I mean, it's the kind of wide receiver Sherrone Moore's clearly going after. Like, you make no mistake about it. Guys like Donovan McCulley, we're going after big-bodied wide receivers. We contacted Deuce Robinson too. Noah Thomas is that kind of guy. And outside of that pass catcher room, I look at Michigan and say, I'm feeling good about where this depth chart is at heading into 2025. Now, going back to what Michigan has, switching to the defense, overall comment on the defense, this unit's really starting to hit its stride under Wink Martindale. There were some growing pains early in 2024. It felt like the defense wasn't necessarily maximizing all the talent it had. You fast forward to the back half of November, limiting that Ohio State team, limiting that Alabama team, two offenses that we just saw what Ohio State can do on offense. This defense has and you're losing a lot of good football players in. Michigan just dominated that football game on defense against Alabama without Mason Grant, without Kenny Grant, without Will Johnson. My biggest takeaway is, one, as a actual unit under Wink Martindale, this is a defense that it's really clicked. Kind of similar to where we were with Mike Macdonald, where there were some growing pains with the Mike Macdonald, Jesse Minter offense. And then it started to click and became one of the best in 2023. I mean, name me a better defense we've seen in the last 2 decades in college football. I think that's a chance you can see that from Michigan in 2025. Maybe not as good as we were in 2023, but an elite caliber defense that we expect. Now, from a personnel standpoint, biggest takeaway for me, Trey Pierce, Inoetta, guys that seem to have really put it together. And to me, when I look at Michigan, the biggest question mark is depth on the defensive line. Look, Derek Moore, TJ Guy, you won't see many better edge rusher duos in the country going into 2025. Retaining those two cats, absolutely massive. The question we had was, what does the interior defensive line look like? And Michigan kicked it around for a couple of names in the portal. You land a guy like Damon Payne. I look at Trey Pierce. I look at Ike. I look at Inoetta and say, well, shoot, you didn't see a ton of them in 2024 because Mason Graham and Kenny Grant rarely left the football field. You got to feel good. Better than you felt a week ago in terms of what Michigan's interior defensive line is going to be. Now, again, would I hate to see Michigan go add one more player? No, absolutely not. You can never have enough depth on the defensive line, and just rotating those guys in and out, keeping them fresh. I feel way better about where the defensive line is now than I did 7 days ago going into 2025. Off-ball linebacker position, Ernest Hausman. I think Jay Sean Barr might kick the edge, but Ernest Hausman, he's going to hold it down. And you have guys like Jimmy Rolder. I thought Jaden Hood played a good game. Obviously, we're all excited about Cole Sullivan. It's hard to not be optimistic about the front seven in general. And then in the back end, I think the one position that seems pretty clear that Michigan wants to address is the boundary cornerback spot. Jair Hill, we feel really good about. Zeke Berry played very, very good in the back half of 2024 as a boundary cornerback, but you probably want to kick him back in a nickel because I think that's where his best position is. He's a good boundary cornerback. I think he can be an elite nickel in the 2025 year. And so I think the conversation is, yeah, we feel good about Josiah Edmond. We feel good about a guy like Shamari Earls coming in as a true freshman, but maybe you want to get one more veteran body that's elite. Well, it sounds like Michigan's going to be going after one in Tacario Davis, the number 1 cornerback in the transfer portal, a guy that certainly could have been a day 2 pick in the NFL draft, 6'4", 190. You take a look at Tacario Davis. One, he's played a ton of football. He's about as battle-tested as it gets. 115 targets faced, only 56 catches given up, a 47% completion percentage, 6% missed tackle rate. A lockdown corner that can do a little press man because of all that length, can be really good in zone coverage because of that length as well, has a knack for getting his hands on footballs. You bring in a guy like Tacario Davis, you suddenly feel really good about him, Shamari Earls, Jair Hill, Josiah Edmond. That's 4 cornerbacks that you feel really good about, which allows you to kick Zeke Berry into that nickel spot. And then you go back to the Michigan depth chart and say, hey, now you're feeling really good about what the secondary is going to look like too. I think Brandon Hillman is going to be a very good safety for Michigan in the 2025 year. This team underperformed in 2024 because they lacked the most important, they lacked in a big way, the most important position of football at the quarterback spot. From what we saw in the back half of November, there are a lot of positions and players on this football team that you have a ton of confidence in going into 2025. This is not a complete rebuild that Michigan has. On the surface, you might say, well, Michigan's got a lot of work to do. Not really when you look at this team. I mean, they lacked at the quarterback spot. They lacked at the pass catcher spot. That offensive line came on in the back half of 2024. There's a lot of really big positives going into the offseason. And we all know what Michigan does with player development. If you can get the most out of a guy like Bryce Underwood going into 2025, yes, I'm a Michigan fan, but there's no doubt in my mind that Michigan can compete at the highest level of this sport because this defense is going to be really good and this rushing attack is going to be dang good too. We'll see where Michigan decides to go over the next couple of weeks. Wanted to hop on and, just tie a little bit of a bow on the Michigan season. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.